All right, welcome back, everybody, to another reading of Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So, last time we were reading through the eyes of Mr. Lockwood, who's being told a story about Mr. Heathcliff and how he ended up getting Wuthering Heights and his story of how he came to be there. And this is done because Mr. Lockwood is currently living at a place that, oh, hi, Monty, that Mr. Heathcliff owns. So we're kind of just going through the series of what happened. And Mr. Heathcliff was very interested in this woman, um, Catherine, who he was very attached to from childhood, but he had no name, no status, no nothing to him. And he'd always loved her and everything. And what happened was he left because she told him that she could never be with him because he was so below her station that it would be a degradation to her. So that happened, but deep down, she really loved him. So anyway, she gets married to this guy, Mr. Linton, becomes Mrs. Linton. There's a huge falling out, a huge issue, and she sees, Heathcliff again, and then she's like, oh, I can never be with Heathcliff again. And now she's torn between these two guys. And eventually, from my assumption, she dies from like a broken heart because she'll never be able to have Heathcliff and Mr. Linton. So last time we were here, she actually passed away. And that's kind of what we're dealing with now. So Heathcliff is very upset that she left him and that she died. So he basically cursed her, and it's just out of control. So that's where we left off in the past of what we know. And we're still reading as Mr. Lockwood, and he's learning about all these events through a woman named Mrs. Dean, who is like the housekeeper. And Heathcliff is still married to Mr. Linton's sister. So I think she's in for a whirlwind of hurt. So that's kind of what I think is going to happen in these next coming chapters, but we'll see. So with that being said, let's continue on with the Goodnight reading series. Chapter 17. That Friday made the last of our fine days for a month. In the evening the weather broke, the wind shifted from south to northeast, and brought rain first and then sleet and snow. On the morrow one could hardly imagine that there had been 3 weeks of summer. The primroses and crocuses were hidden under wintry drifts. The larks were silent, and the young leaves of the early trees smitten and blackened. And dreary and chill and dismal that morrow did ever creep. My master kept his room. I took possession of the lonely parlor, converting it into a nursery, and there I was sitting, with the moaning doll of a child laid on my knee, rocking it to and fro, and watching, meanwhile, the still driving flakes build up on the uncurtained window. When the door opened and some person entered, out of breath and laughing, my anger was greater than my astonishment for quite a minute. I supposed it one of the maids, and I cried, "Have done? How dare you? You show your giddiness here. What would Mr. Linton say if he heard you?" "Excuse me," answered a familiar voice, "but I know Edgar is in bed, and I cannot help myself." But the speaker came forward to the fire, panting, and holding her hand to her side. "I have run the whole way from Wuthering Heights," she continued after a pause, "except where I have flown. I couldn't count the number of falls that I've had. Oh, I'm aching all over. Don't be alarmed. There shall be an explanation as soon as I can give it. Only just have the goodness to step out and order the carriage to take me on to Gimmerton, and tell a servant to seek up a few clothes in my wardrobe." The intruder was Mrs. Heathcliff. She certainly seemed in no laughing predicament, her hair streaming on her shoulders, dripping with snow and water. She was dressed in the girlish dress she commonly wore, befitting her age more than her position, a low frock with short sleeves and nothing on either head nor neck. The frock was of light silk, and clung to her with wet, and her feet were protected merely by thin slippers. Add to this a deep cut under one ear, which could only be prevented from bleeding profusely. a white face scratched and bruised, and a frame hardly able to support itself. Through fatigue, you could see that my first thought was that she was much allayed, even though I had the leisure to examine her. "My dear young lady," I exclaimed, "I'll stir nowhere and hear nothing till ye have removed every article of your clothes, and put on dry things, and certainly ye shall not go to Gimmerton tonight, so it is needless to order the carriage." "Certainly I shall," she said, "walking or riding, yet I've no objection to dress myself decently. And see how it flows down my neck, and now the fire does make it smart." She insisted on my fulfilling her directions before she could let me touch her, and not till after the coachman had been instructed to get ready and a maid sent to pack up some necessary attire did I obtain her consent for the binding of the wound by her neck and helping her change into garments. "Now, Ellen," she said when my task was finished, and she was seated in an easy chair on the hearth, with a cup of tea before her, "sit down opposite me and put Catherine's baby away. I don't like to see it. You mustn't think I care little for Catherine, because I behaved so foolishly on entering. I've cried, bitterly, yes, more than anyone else has reason to cry. We parted unreconciled, you remember, and I shan't forgive myself. But for all that, I was not going to sympathize with him, the brute beast. Oh, give me the poker. This is the last thing of his that I have about me." She slipped the long gold ring from her third finger and threw it on the floor. "I'll smash it," she continued, striking with childish spite, "and then I'll burn it." And she took and dropped the misused article among the coals. "There, he shall buy another. If he gets me back again, he'll be capable of coming to seek me. To ease Edgar, I dare not say, lest that notion should possess his wicked head. And besides, Edgar has not been kind, has he? And I won't be suing for his assistance, nor will I bring him into more trouble. Necessity compelled me to seek shelter here, though if I had not learnt he was out of the way, I'd have halted at the kitchen, washed my face, warmed myself, and got you to bring what I wanted, and departed again to anywhere out of reach of my accursed, of that incarnate goblin. He is in such a fury. If he had caught me, oh, it's a pity. Earnshaw is not his match in strength. I wouldn't have run till I'd seen him, but, oh, had Hindley been able to have done of it as well." "Don't talk so fast, miss," I interrupted. "You'll disorder the handkerchief I've tied around your face, and make the cut bleed again. Drink your tea and take your breath, and give over laughing. Laughter is sadly out of place under this roof and in your condition." "An undeniable truth," she replied. "Listen to that child. It maintains a constant wail. Oh, please send it out of my hearing for an hour. I shan't stay any longer." I rang the bell and committed it to a servant's care, and then I inquired what had urged her to escape from Wuthering Heights in such an unlikely plight, and where she meant to go, as she refused remaining with us. "I ought, and I wish to remain," she answered, "only to cheer Edgar and to take care of the baby, for two things, and because the Grange is my rightful home. But I tell you, he wouldn't let me. Do you think that he could bear to see me grow fat and merry? Oh, and to think that we were tranquil and not resolve on poisoning our comfort. Now I have the satisfaction of being sure that he detests me to the point of annoying him so seriously to have me within earshot or eyesight. I notice that when I enter his presence, the muscles of his countenance are involuntarily distorted into an expression of hatred, partly arising from his knowledge of good causes. I have to feel that sentiment for him, and partly from original aversion. It is strong enough to make me feel pretty certain that he would not chase me over England, supposing I contrived a clear escape, and therefore I must get away. I've recovered from my first desire, to be killed by him. I'd rather he'd kill himself. He has extinguished my love effectually, and I'm at my ease. I can recollect yet how I loved him, and can dimly imagine that I could still be loving him. If, oh, no, no, even if he had doted on me, the devilish nature would have revealed its existence somehow. Catherine had awfully perverted taste to esteem him so dearly, knowing him so well. Pah! Monster! Would that he could have been blotted out of creation and out of my memory. Hush, hush, he's a human being, I said. Be more charitable. There be worse men than he is yet. He is not a human being, she retorted, and he has no claim on my charity. I gave him my heart, and he took and pinched it to death and flung it back at me. People feel with their hearts, Ellen, and since he has destroyed mine, I have not power to feel for him, and I would not, though he groaned from this to his dying day, and wept tears of blood for Catherine. No, indeed, I wouldn't. And here Isabella began to cry, but immediately dashing the water from her lashes, she recommenced. You asked, what has driven me to flight at last? I was compelled to attempt it, because I had succeeded in rousing his rage a pitch upon his malignity. Pulling out the nerves with red-hot pincers requires more coolness than knocking on the head. He was worked up to forget the fiendish prudence he boasted of, and proceeded to murderous violence. I experienced pleasure in being able to exasperate him. The sense of pleasure woke my instinct of self-preservation. So, I fairly broke free, and if ever I come into his hands again, he is welcome to signal revenge. Yesterday, you know, Mr. Earnshaw would have been at the funeral. He kept himself sober purposely, totally sober. Not going to bed mad at 6 o'clock and getting up drunk at 12. Consequently, he was in suicidal spirits, as fit for the church of for a dance, and instead he sat down by the fire and swallowed gin or brandy by tumblefuls. Well, that may be what he did, but Heathcliff is another matter. I shudder to name him, as he has been a stranger in the house from last Sunday till today. Whether the angels have fed him, or his kin beneath, I cannot tell, but he has not eaten a meal with us for nearly a week. He has just come home at dawn, and gone upstairs to his chamber, locking himself in, as if anybody dreamt of coveting his company. There he has continued praying like a Methodist. Only the deity he implored is senseless dust and ashes and God. When addressed, he was curiously confounded with his own black father. After concluding these precious orisons, they had lasted generally till he grew hoarse, and his voice was strangled in his throat. He would be off again, always straight down to the Grange. I wonder Edgar did not send for a constable and give him into custody. Forgive me, grieved as I was about Catherine, it is impossible to avoid regarding this season of deliverance from degrading oppression as a holiday. I did recover spirit sufficient to hear Joseph's eternal lectures about weeping, and to move up and down the house less with the foot of a frightened thief than formerly. You wouldn't think that I should cry at anything Joseph could say, but he and Hareton are detestable companions. I'd rather sit with Hindley and hear his awful talk than with that little maester and his staunch supporter, that odious old man. When Heathcliff was in, I was often obliged to seek the kitchen and other society, or starve among the damp, uninhabited chambers when he is not. As was the case in this week, I established a chair at one corner of the house fire, and never mind how Mr. Earnshaw may occupy himself, and he does not interfere with my arrangements. He is quieter now than he used to have been. If no one provokes him, more sullen and depressed and less furious. Joseph affirms he's sure he's an altered man, that the Lord has touched his heart, and that he is saved so as by fire. I'm puzzled to detect signs of the favorable change, but it is not my business. Yesterday evening I sat in my nook reading some old books till late on towards 12. It seemed so dismal to go upstairs with the wild snow blowing outside, and my thoughts continually reverting to the kirkyard and the new-made grave. I dared hardly lift my eyes from the page before me. That melancholy scene so instantly usurped its place. Hindley sat opposite me. His head was leaning on his hand, perhaps meditating on the same subject. He had ceased drinking at some point below irrationality, and had neither stirred nor spoken during 2 or 3 hours. There was no sound through the house, but the moaning wind which shook the windows every now and then, the faint cracking of the coals, and the click of my snuffers as I removed at intervals the long wick of the candle. Hareton and Joseph were probably fast asleep in bed. It was very, very sad, and while I read I sighed, for it seemed as if all joy had vanished from the world, never to be restored. The doleful silence was then at length broken by the sound of the kitchen latch. Heathcliff had returned from his watch earlier than usual, owing, I suppose, to the sudden storm. That entrance had fastened, and we heard his coming around to get by. I rose with an irrepressible expression of what I felt on my lips, which induced my companion, who had been staring towards the door, to turn and look at me. "I'll keep him out 5 minutes," he exclaimed. "He won't object." "No, you may keep him out of the whole night for me," I answered. "Do put the key in the lock and draw the bolts." Earnshaw accomplished this ere his guest reached the front. Then he came and brought his chair to the other side of my table, leaning over it and searching in my eyes for a sympathy with the burning hate that gleamed from his. As he both looked and felt like an assassin, he couldn't exactly find that, but he discovered enough to encourage him to speak. "You and I," he said, "have each a great debt to settle with the man out yonder. If we were neither of us cowards, we might combine to discharge it. Are you as soft as your brother? Are you willing to endure the last and not weep once the attempt at a repayment?" "I am very weary of enduring now," I replied, "and I'd be glad of a retaliation that wouldn't recoil on myself. But treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends. They wound those who resort to them, worse than their enemies." "Treachery and violence are just return for treachery and violence," cried Hindley. "Mrs. Heathcliff, I'll ask you to do nothing, but sit still and be dumb. Tell me now, can you? I'm sure you would have as much pleasure as I in witnessing the conclusion of the fiend's existence. He'll be your death unless you overreach him, and he'll be my ruin. Damn the hellish villain! He knocks at the door, as if he were master already here. Promise to hold your tongue, before that clock strikes. It wants 3 minutes of 1. You're a free woman." He took the implements which I described to you in my letter from his breast, and would have turned down the candle. I snatched it away, however, and seized his arm. "I will not hold my tongue," I said. "You mustn't touch him. Let the door remain shut, and be quiet." "No, I've formed my resolution, and by God, I will execute it," cried the desperate being. "I'll do you a kindness in spite of yourself, and Hareton justice. And you needn't trouble your head to screen me. Catherine is gone. Nobody alive would regret me or be ashamed, though I cut my throat this minute, and it's time to make an end." I might as well have struggled with a bear or reasoned with a lunatic. The only resource left to me was to run to a lattice and warn his attended victim of the fate which awaited him. "You'd better seek shelter somewhere else tonight," I exclaimed in a rather triumphant tone. "Mr. Earnshaw has a mind to shoot you if you persist in endeavoring to enter." "You better open the door, you," he answered, addressing me by some elegant term that I don't care to repeat. "I shall not meddle in the matter," I returned again. Come in and get shot if you please. I've done my duty. With that, I shut the window and returned to my place by the fire, having too small a stock of hypocrisy at my command to pretend my anxiety for the danger that menaced him. Earnshaw swore passionately at me, affirming that I loved the villain yet, and calling me all sorts of names for the base spirit I evinced. And I, in my secret heart, thought what a blessing it would be for him should Heathcliff put him out of his misery, and what a blessing for me should he send Heathcliff to his right abode. As I sat nursing these reflections, the casement behind me was banged on to the floor by a blow from the latter individual, and his black countenance looked blightedly through. The stanchion stood too close to suffer his shoulders to follow, and I smiled, exulting in my fancied security. His hair and clothes were whitened with snow, and his sharp cannibal teeth, revealed by cold and wrath, gleamed through the dark. "Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent," he gurned, as Joseph calls it. "I cannot commit murder," I replied. "Mr. Hindley stands sentinel with a knife and a loaded pistol." "Let me in by the kitchen door," he said. "Hindley will be there for me," I answered, "and that's a poor love of yours that cannot bear a shower of snow. We were left at peace in our beds as long as the summer moon shone, but the moment a blast of winter returns you must run for shelter. Heathcliff, if I were you, I'd go stretch myself over her grave and die like a faithful dog. The world is surely not worth living in now, is it? You had distinctly impressed on me the idea that Catherine was the whole joy of your life. I can't imagine how you think of her surviving her loss." "He's in there, is he?" exclaimed my companion, rushing to the gap. "If I can get my arm out, I can hit him." "I'm afraid, Ellen, you'll let me down as really wicked, but you don't know all, so please don't judge. I wouldn't have aided or abetted an attempt on even his life for anything. Wish that he were dead, I must, but therefore I was fearfully disappointed and unnerved by the terror of the consequences of my taunting speech, when he flung himself on Earnshaw's weapon and wrenched it from his grasp. The charge exploded, and the knife, in springing back, closed to its owner's wrist. Heathcliff pulled it away by main force, slitting up the flesh as it passed on, and thrust it deep into his pocket. He again took a stone and struck down the division between the two windows and sprung in. His adversary had fallen senseless with the excessive pain and the flow of blood that gushed from an artery or a large vein. The ruffian then kicked and trampled on him, and dashed his head repeatedly against the flags, holding me with one hand in the meantime, to prevent me from summoning Joseph. He exerted a preternatural human strength that, in abstaining from finishing him completely, but getting out of breath, he finally desisted and dragged the apparently inanimate body into the settle. There he tore off the sleeve of Earnshaw's coat and bound up the wound with brutal roughness, spitting and cursing. Oh, and during the operation he was as energetic as he had been before when he was kicking him. Being at liberty, I lost no time in seeking the old servant, who, having gathered by degrees the purport of my hasty tale, hurried below, gasping as he descended the steps 2 at a time. "What is you doing there now? What are you doing now?" "There's this to do," thundered Heathcliff, "that your master's mad, and should he last another month, I'll have him to an asylum. And how the devil did you come to fasten me out, you toothless hound? Don't stand muttering and mumbling there. Come, I'm not going to nurse him. Wash that stuff away, and mind the sparks of your candle. It is more than half brandy." "And you son you be nurturing on him," exclaimed Joseph, lifting his hands and his eyes in horrors. "If I ever seed a sight like this, oh, may the Lord—" Heathcliff gave him a push into his knees in the middle of the blood and flung a towel at him. But instead of proceeding to dry it up, he joined his hands and began a prayer with excitement which caused my laughter from its odd phraseology. I was in a condition of mind to be shocked at nothing. In fact, I was as reckless as some malefactors show themselves at the foot of the gallows. "Oh, I forgot you," said the tyrant. "You shall do that. Down with you. And you conspire with him against me, do you, little viper? There, that is work fit for you." He shook me until my teeth rattled and pitched me beside Joseph, who steadily concluded his supplications and then rose, vowing that he would set off for the Grange directly. Mr. Linton was a magistrate, and though he had 50 wives dead, he should inquire into this. He was so obstinate in his resolution that Heathcliff made it expedient to compel my lips a recapitulation of what had taken place, standing over me heaving with malevolence, as I reluctantly delivered the account in answer to his questions. It required a great deal of labor to satisfy the old man that he was not the aggressor, especially with my hardly wrung replies. However, Mr. Earnshaw soon convinced him that he was alive still. He hastened to administer a dose of spirits, and by the succor his master presently regained motion and consciousness. Heathcliff was aware that he was ignorant of treatment, received while insensible, called him delirious, intoxicated, and he said he could not notice his atrocious conduct further, but advised him to bed. And to my joy he left us, but giving this judicious counsel, Hindley stretched himself on the hearthstone. I departed to my own room, marveling that I had escaped so easily. This morning when I came down, about half an hour before noon, Mr. Earnshaw was sitting by the fire, deadly sick. His evil genius, almost as gaunt and ghastly, leant against the chimney. Neither appeared inclined to dine, and having waited till all was cold on the table, I commenced alone. Nothing hindered me from eating heartily, and I experienced a certain sense of satisfaction and superiority. At intervals I cast a look towards my silent companions, and felt the comfort of a quiet conscience within me. After I had done, I ventured on to the usual liberty of drawing near a fire, going round Earnshaw's seat and kneeling in a corner beside him. Heathcliff did not glance my way, and I gazed up and contemplated his features almost as confidently as if they had been turned to stone. His forehead, that I once thought so manly, and that I now think so diabolical, was shaded with a heavy cloud. His basilisk eyes were nearly quenched by sleepiness and weeping. Perhaps for the lashes were wet then, his lips devoid of the ferocious sneer, and sealed in an expression of unspeakable sadness. Had it been another, I would have covered my face in the presence of such grief. In his case, I was gratified, and ignoble as it seems to insult a fallen enemy, I couldn't miss the chance of sticking in a dart. His weakness was the only time when I could taste the delight of paying wrong for wrong. Fee, miss, I interrupted. Oh, crap. We're back to our good friend. Fie, miss, I interrupted. One might suppose ye had never opened a Bible in your life. If God afflict your enemies, surely that ought suffice you. It is both mean and presumptuous to add your torture to his. In general, I'll allow that it would be, Ellen, she continued, but what misery laid on Heathcliff could content me, unless I had a hand in it. I'd rather he suffered less, if I might cause his sufferings, and he might know that I was the cause. Oh, I owe him so much. On only one condition can I hope to forgive him. It is if I make an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For every wrench of agony, return a wrench. Oh, reduce him to my level, as he was the first to injure. Make him the first to implore pardon, and then, by then only, Ellen. I might show you some generosity, but it is utterly impossible. I can ever be revenged, and therefore I cannot forgive him. Hindley wanted some water, and I handed him a glass and asked him how he was. Not as ill as I wish, he replied, but leaving out my arm, every inch of me is as sore as if I had been fighting with a legion of imps. Yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and the bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you for fear of offending her. Well, people don't really rise from their grave, or at last night she might have witnessed a repulsive scene. Are you not bruised and cut over your chest and shoulders? I can't say, he answered. But what do you mean? Did he dare to strike me when I was down? He trampled on and kicked you and dashed you on the ground, I whispered, and his mouth watered to tear you with his teeth because he's only half a man, not so much. Mr. Earnshaw then looked up like me, to the countenance of our mutual foe, who, absorbed in his anguish, seemed insensible to anything around him. The longer he stood, the plainer his reflections revealed their blackness through his features. Oh, if God would give me strength to strangle him in my last agony, I'd go to hell with joy, I thought to myself. Oh, nay, it's enough that he has murdered one of you, I observed aloud. At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now, had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. After all, it is a preferable thing to be hated more than to be loved by him. When I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was before he came, I am fit to curse the day. Most likely Heathcliff noticed the truth of what was said in the spirit of the person who said it. His attention was roused. I saw, for his eyes rained down tears among the ashes, and he drew his breath in suffocating sighs. I stared full at him and laughed scornfully. The clouded windows of hell flashed a moment towards me. The fiend which usually looked out, however, was so dimmed and drowned that I did not fear to hazard another sound of derision. "Get up and be gone out of my sight," said the mourner. I guess he uttered those words at last, though his voice was hardly intelligible. "I beg your pardon," I replied, "but I loved Catherine too, and her brother requires attendance which, for her sake, I shall happily supply. Now that she's dead, I see her in Hindley. Hindley has exactly her eyes. If you had not tried to gouge them out and made them black and red in her—" "Get up, wretched idiot, before I stamp you to death," he cried, making a movement that caused me to make one also. "But then," I continued, holding myself ready to flee, "if poor Catherine had trusted you and assumed you the ridiculous, contemptible, degrading title of Mrs. Heathcliff, she would soon have presented a similar picture. She wouldn't have borne your abominable behavior quietly. Her detestation and disgust must have found voice." The back of the settle in Earnshaw's person interposed between me and him, so instead of endeavoring to reach me, he snatched a dinner knife from the table and flung it at my head. It struck beneath my ear and stopped the sentence I was uttering, but pulling it out, I sprang to the door and delivered another which I hope went a little deeper than his missile. The last glimpse I caught of him was a furious rush on his part, checked by the embrace of his host. Oh, both fell locked together on the hearth, and in my flight through the kitchen I bid Joseph speed to his master. I knocked over Hareton, who was hanging a litter of puppies from a chair back in the doorway, and blessed as a soul escaped from purgatory, I bounded, I even leaped and flew down the steep road, then quitting its windings, shot direct across the moor, rolling over the banks and wading through the marshes, precipitating myself, in fact, towards the beacon of light of the Grange. and far rather than I would have been condemned on a perpetual dwelling in the infernal regions, than even for one night abide beneath the roof of Wuthering Heights again. Isabella ceased speaking and took a drink of her tea. Then she rose, bidding me to put on her bonnet and a great shawl that I had brought, and turning a deaf ear to my entreaties for her remain for another hour, she stepped into a chair and kissed Edgar's and Catherine's portraits and bestowed a similar salute on me, and descended to the carriage, accompanied by Fanny, who yelped wild with joy at recovering her mistress. She was driven away, never to revisit this neighborhood, but a regular correspondence was established between her and my master when things were more settled. I believe her new abode was in the south near London. There she had a son born, a few months subsequent to her escape. He was christened Linton, and from the first she reported him to be an ailing, peevish creature. Mr. Heathcliff, meeting me one day in the village, inquired where she lived. I refused to tell. He remarked that it was not one of any moment, that only she must beware of coming to her brother. She should not be with him, if he had to keep her himself. Though I would give no information, he discovered through some of the other servants both her place of residence and the existence of the child. Still, he hadn't gone to molest her, for which forbearance she might thank his aversion, I suppose. He often asked about the infant, when he saw me, and on hearing its name smiled grimly and observed, "They wish me to hate it too, do they?" "I don't think they wish you to know anything about it," I answered. "But I'll have it," he said. "When I want it, they may reckon on that." Fortunately, its mother died before the time arrived, some 13 years after the decease of Catherine, when Linton was 12 or a little more. On the day succeeding Isabella's first unexpected visit, I had no opportunity of speaking to my master. He shunned conversation and was fit for discussing nothing. When I could get him to listen, I saw it pleased him that his sister had left her husband, whom he had abhorred with an intensity which the mildness of his nature would scarcely seem to allow. So deep and sensitive was his aversion that he refrained from going anywhere he was likely to see or hear of Heathcliff. Grief and that together transformed him into a complete hermit. He threw up his office of magistrate, and ceased even to attend church, and even avoided the village on all occasions, and spent a life of entire seclusion within the limits of his park and grounds, only varied by the solitary rambles on the moors and visits to the grave of his wife, mostly at evening, or in the early morning before other wanderers were abroad. But he was too good to be thoroughly unhappy long. He didn't pray for Catherine's soul to haunt him. Time brought resignation and melancholy sweeter than common joy. He recalled her memory with ardent, tender love, and a hopeful aspiring to the better world where he doubted not she was gone. And he had earthly consolation and affections also. For a few days, I said, he seemed regardless of the puny successor to the departed. That coldness melted as fast as snow in April, and ere the tiny thing could damper a word or totter a step, it wielded the despot's scepter in his heart. It was named Catherine, but he never called it the name in full, as he had never called the first Catherine short, probably because Heathcliff had a habit of doing so. The little one was always Cathy. It formed to him a distinction from the mother, and yet a connection with her, and his attachment sprang from its relation to her far more than from it being his own. I used to draw a comparison between him and Hindley and Earnshaw, and perplexed myself to explain satisfactorily why their conduct was so opposite in similar circumstances. They had both been fond husbands, and were both attached to their children, and I could not see how they shouldn't both have taken the same road for a good or evil. But, I thought in my mind, Hindley, with apparently the stronger head, had shown himself sadly the worse and the weaker man. When his ship struck, the captain abandoned his post, and the crew, instead of trying to save her, rushed to riot in confusion, leaving no hope to their luckless vessel. Linton, on the contrary, displayed a true courage of a loyal and faithful soul. He trusted God, and God comforted him. One hoped, and the other despaired. They chose their own lots, and were righteously doomed to endure them. But you'll not want to hear my moralizing, Mr. Lockwood. You'll judge as well as you can, as all things. The end of Earnshaw was what might have been expected. It followed fast on his sister's. There were scarcely 6 months between them. We at the Grange never got a very succinct account of his state of proceeding at all. All that I did learn was on occasion of going to aid in preparations for the funeral. Mr. Kenneth came to announce the event to my master. "Well, Nellie," he said, riding into the yard one morning, too early to alarm me with an instant presentiment of bad news. "It's yours and my turn to go into mourning at present. Who's given us the slip now, do you think?" "Who?" I asked in a flurry. "Why, guess," he returned, dismounting and slinging his bridle on a hook by the door. "And nip up the corner of your apron. I'm certain you'll need it." "Not Mr. Heathcliff, surely?" I exclaimed. "What? Would you have tears for him?" exclaimed the doctor. "No, Heathcliff's a tough young fellow. He looks blooming today. I've just seen him. He's rapidly regaining flesh since he lost his better half." "Who is it then, Mr. Kenneth?" I repeated impatiently. "Hindley Earnshaw, your old friend Hindley," he replied, "and my wicked gossip, though he's been too wild for me this long while. There, I said we should draw water, but cheer up. He died true to his character, drunk as a lord. Poor lad, I'm so sorry to say. One can't help missing an old companion, though he had the worst tricks with him that ever man imagined, and has done me many a rascally turn. He's barely 27, it seems. That's your own age. Who would have thought you were born in one year?" I confess this blow was greater to me than the shock of Mrs. Linton's death. Ancient associations I lingered around my heart. I sat down in the porch and wept as a blood relation, desiring Kenneth to get another servant to introduce him to my master. I could not hinder myself from pondering on the question. Had he had fair play? Whatever I did, that idea would bother me. It was so tiresomely pertinacious that I resolved on requesting leave to go to Wuthering Heights and assist in the last duties to the dead. Mr. Linton was extremely reluctant to consent, but I pleaded eloquently for the friendless condition in which he lay, and I said to my master, my old master and my foster brother, that I had a claim on my services as strong as his own. Besides, I reminded him that the child Hareton was his wife's nephew, and in the absence of a nearer kin, he ought to act as the guardian, and he ought to and must inquire how the property was left, and look over the concerns of his brother-in-law. He was unfit for attending to such matters then, but he bid me to speak to his lawyer, and at length permitted me to go. His lawyer had been Earnshaw's also. I had called at the village and asked him to accompany me. He shook his head and advised that Heathcliff should be let alone, affirming, if the truth were known, Hareton would be found little else than a beggar. "His father died in debt," he said. "The whole property is mortgaged, and the sole chance for that natural heir is to allow him an opportunity of creating some interest in the creditor's heart, that he may be inclined to deal with leniently towards him." When I reached the Heights, I explained that I had come to see everything carried on decently, and Joseph, who appeared in sufficient distress, expressed satisfaction at my presence. Mr. Heathcliff said he did not perceive that I was wanted, but I might stay and order the arrangements for the funeral if I chose. "Correctly, though," he remarked. "That fool's body should be buried at the crossroads without ceremony of any kind. I happened to leave him 10 minutes yesterday afternoon, and in that interval he fastened the two doors of the house against me, and he spent the night in drinking himself to death deliberately. We broke in this morning, for we heard him snorting like a horse, and there he was, laid over the settle, flailing and scalping. Would he have not wakened him? I then sent for Kenneth, and he came, but not till the beast had changed into a carrion, and he was both dead and cold and stark. And so, you'll allow, it was useless making more stir about him. The old servant confirmed his statement, but muttered, "I'd you rather he growin' a hustlin' for the doctor? Shoulda tent the master better nurture him. And he weren't a dead en. Left an hour a sortin' now." I insisted on the funeral being respectable. Mr. Heathcliff said that I might have my own way there too, only he desired me to remember that the money for the whole affair came out of his pocket. He maintained a hard, careless deportment, indicative of neither joy nor sorrow. If anything, it expressed a flinty gratification at a piece of difficult work successfully executed. I observed once, indeed, something like the exultation in his aspect. It was when the people were bearing the coffin from the house that he had the hypocrisy to represent a mourner, and previous to following with Hareton, he lifted the unfortunate child onto the table and muttered with a particular gusto, "Now, my bonny lad, you are mine, and we'll see if one tree won't grow as crooked as the other, with the same wind to twist it." The unsuspecting thing was pleased at this speech. He played with Heathcliff's whiskers and stroked his cheek, but I divined its meaning and observed tartly, "That boy must go back to Thrushcross Grange with me, sir. There is nothing in the world less to yours that he has." "Does Linton say so?" he demanded. "Of course he has ordered me to take him," I replied. "Well," said the scoundrel, "we'll not argue the subject now, but I have a fancy to try my hand at rearing a young one, so intimate to your master that I must supply the place of this with my own. If he attempt to remove it, I don't engage to let Hareton go undisputed, but I'll be pretty sure to make the other come. Remember to tell him." This hint was enough to bind our hands. I repeated its substance on my return, and Edgar Linton, little interested at the commencement, spoke no more of interfering. I'm not aware that he could have done it to any purpose, had he been ever so willing. The guest was now the master of Wuthering Heights. He held firm possession, and proved to the attorney, who, in his turn, proved it to Mr. Linton, that Earnshaw had mortgaged every yard of land he owned for cash to supply his mania for gaming, and he, Heathcliff, was the mortgagee. In that manner, Hareton should now be the first gentleman in the neighborhood that was reduced to a state of complete dependence on his father's inveterate enemy, and lives in his own house as a servant, deprived of the advantage of wages, and quite unable to right himself because of his friendlessness, and his ignorance that has been wronged. Chapter 18. "The 12 years continued," said Mrs. Dean, "following that dismal period, were the happiest of my life. My greatest troubles in their passage rose from our little lady's trifling illnesses, which she had to experience in common with all children, rich and poor. For the rest, after the first 6 months, she grew like a larch, and could walk and talk too in her own way, before the heath, and blossomed into a second time over Mr. Linton's dust. She was the most winning thing that ever brought sunshine into a desolate house, a real beauty in face, with the Earnshaw's handsome dark eyes, but the Lintons' fair skin and small features, and yellow curling hair. Her spirit was high, though not rough, and qualified a heart sensitive and lively to an excess in its affections. That capacity for intense attachments reminded me of her mother. Still, she did not resemble her, for she could be soft and mild as a dove, and she had a gentler voice and a pensive expression. Her anger was never furious, her love never fierce. It was deep and tender. However, it must be acknowledged that she had faults to foil her gifts. A propensity to be saucy was one, and a perverse will that indulged children invariably to acquire, whether they be good-tempered or cross. If a servant chanced to vex her, it was always, "I shall tell Papa." And if she reproved her, even by a look, you would have thought it a heart-breaking business. I don't believe he ever did speak a harsh word to her. He took her education entirely on himself and made it an amusement. Fortunately, curiosity and a quick intellect urged her into an apt scholar, and she learned rapidly and eagerly and did honor to his teaching. Till she reached the age of 13, she had not once been beyond the range of the park by herself. Mr. Linton would take her with him a mile or so outside on rare occasions, but he trusted her to no one else. Gimmerton was an unsubstantial name in her ears. The chapel, the only building that she had approached or entered, except her own home. Wuthering Heights and Mr. Heathcliff did not exist to her. She was a perfect recluse, and apparently perfectly contented. Sometimes, indeed, while surveying the country from her nursery window, she would observe, "Ellen, how long will it be until I can walk to the top of those hills? I wonder what lies on the other side. Is it the sea?" "No, Miss Cathy," I would answer. "It is the hills again, just like these." "And what are those golden rocks like when you stand under them?" she once asked. The abrupt descent of Penistone Crags particularly attracted her notice, especially when the setting sun had shone atop its most heights, and the whole extent of the landscape besides lay in shadow. I explained that they were a bare mass of stone, and hardly enough earth in their clefts to nourish a stunted tree. "And why are they bright so long after the evening has been here?" she pursued. "Because they are a great deal higher than we are," I replied. "And you could not climb them? They are too high and steep. In winter and the frost is always there before it comes to us, and deep into summer I have found snow under the Black Hollow on the northern east side." "Oh, you have been on them?" she cried gleefully. "And then I can go too when I'm a woman. Has Papa been, Ellen?" Your papa will tell you, miss," I answered hastily, "that they are not the worth of trouble for visiting. The moors are where you ramble with him, and it is much nicer, and Thrushcross Park is the finest place in the world." "Well, I know the park, and I don't know those," she murmured to herself, "and I should delight to look around me from the brow of that tallest point. Oh, my little pony Minnie shall take me sometime." One of the maids, mentioning the fairy cave, quite turned her head with a desire to fulfill this project. She teased Mr. Linton about it, and he promised she could have the journey when she got older. But Miss Catherine measured her age in months, and, "Well, now I'm old enough to go to Penistone Crags," was her constant question in her mouth. The road thither wound close by Wuthering Heights. Edgar had, I conjecture they died of the same thing, a kind of fever, slow at its commencement, but incurable, and rapidly consuming life towards the close. She wrote to inform her brother of the probable conclusion of the 4 months of indisposition under which she had suffered, and entreated him to come to her, if possible, for she had so much to settle, and she wished to bid him adieu, and deliver Linton safely into his hands. Her hope was that Linton might be left with him, as he had been with her. His father, she would have feigned confidence in herself, and no desire to assume the burden of maintenance or education. My master hesitated not a moment in complying with her request. Reluctant as he was to leave home at ordinary calls, he flew to answer this, commending Catherine to my particular vigilance, and in his absence with reiterated orders that she must not wander out of the park, even under my escort. He did not calculate on her going unaccompanied. He was away 3 weeks. The first day or two, my charge sat in a corner of the library, too sad for either reading or playing, and in that quiet state she caused me little trouble. But it was succeeded at an interval of impatience, fretful weariness, and being too busy and too old then to run up and down amusing her, I hit on a method by which she might entertain herself. I used to send her on travels around the grounds, now on foot and now on a pony, indulging her with a patient audience of all her real imaginary adventures when she returned. The summer shone in full prime, and she took a taste for this solitary rambling, that she often contrived to remain out from breakfast till tea, and then the evenings were spent in recounting her fanciful tales. I did not fear her breaking bounds, because the gates were generally locked, and I thought she would scarcely venture forth alone, if they had stood wide open. Unluckily, my confidence proved misplaced. Catherine came to me one morning at 8 o'clock and said that she was that day an Arabian merchant was going across the desert and with his caravan, and I must give her plenty of provision for herself and the beasts. A horse and 3 camels, personated by a large hound and a couple of pointers. I got together a good store of dainties and slung them in a basket on one side of the saddle, and she sprang up as gay as a fairy, sheltered by her wide-brimmed hat and a gauze veil from the July sun, and trotted off with a merry laugh, mocking my cautious counsel to avoid galloping, and to come back early. The naughty thing never made her appearance at tea. One traveler, the hound, being an old dog, and fond of its ease, returned, but neither Cathy nor the pony nor the pointers were visible in any direction, and I dispatched emissaries down this path and that path, and at last went wandering in search of her myself. There was a laborer working on a fence round a plantation, on the borders of the grounds. I inquired of him if he had seen our young lady. "I saw her at morn," he replied. "She would have me to cut her hazel switch, and then she leapt her galloway over the hedge yonder, where it's a lowest, and galloped out of sight." You may guess how I felt at hearing this news. It struck me directly that she must have started for Penistone Crags. "What will become of her?" I exclaimed, pushing through a gap in which the man was repairing, and making straight towards the high road. I walked as if for a wager, mile after mile, till a turn brought me in view of the heights, but no Catherine could I detect far or near. The Crags were about 1.5 miles beyond Mr. Heathcliff's place, and that is 4 from the Grange, so I began to fear night would fall ere should I not reach them. And what if she could have slipped in clambering among those rocks, and been killed or broken some of her bones? My suspense was truly painful, and at first it gave me delightful relief to observe, in hurrying by the farmhouse, Charlie, the fiercest of the pointers, lying under a window, with a swelled head and a bleeding ear. I opened the wicket and ran to the door, knocking vehemently for admittance. A woman whom I knew, and who formerly lived at Gimmerton, answered. She had been a servant there since the death of Mr. Earnshaw. "Ah," she said, "ye come here seeking your little mistress? Don't be frightened. She's here safe, but I'm glad it wasn't the master." "Is he not at home, then? Is he?" I panted, quite breathless with quick walking and alarm. Oh no," she replied. "Both Joseph and he are off, and I think they won't return this hour or more. Step in and rest you a bit." I entered and beheld my stray lamb seated on the hearth, rocking herself in a little chair that had been her mother's when she was a child. Her hat was hung against the wall, and she seemed perfectly at home, laughing and chatting in the best spirits imaginable, to Hareton, now a great strong lad of 18, who stared at her with considerable curiosity and astonishment, comprehending precious little of the fluent succession of remarks and questions which her tongue never ceased pouring forth. "Very well, miss," I exclaimed, concealing my joy under an angry countenance. "This is be your last ride till your papa comes back. I'll not trust ye ever over the threshold again, you naughty, naughty girl." Ellen," she cried, gaily jumping up and running to my side. "I shall have a pretty story to tell tonight, and you've found out. Have you ever been here in your life before?" "Put on that hat and come at once," I said. "I'm dreadfully grieved at you, Miss Cathy. You've done extremely wrong, and it's no use pouting and crying. That won't repay the trouble that I've had, scouring the country after you. You think you know how Mr. Linton charged me to keep you, and you're stealing off so. It shows you're a cunning little fox, and nobody will put your faith in you any more than now." "Well, what have I done?" she sobbed, instantly checked. "Papa charged me nothing. He'll scold me. Ellen, he's never cross like you." "Oh, come, come," I repeated. "I'll tie the ribbon. Now let us have no petulance. Oh, for shame. You're 13 years old and such a baby." This exclamation caused her by pushing the hat from her head and retreating to the chimney out of my reach. "Nay," said the servant, "don't be hard on the bonny lass, Mrs. Dean. She made her stop. She's fain have ridden forwards, afeard that you should be uneasy. But Hareton often to go with her, and I thought he could. Oh, it's a wild road over the hills." Hareton during the discussion stood with his hands in his pockets, too awkward to speak, though he looked as if he did not relish my intrusion. "How long am I to wait?" I continued, disregarding the woman's interference. "It will be dark in 10 minutes. Where is the pony? Miss Cathy, where is Phoenix? I shall leave you unless you be quick, so please yourself out." "The pony's in the yard," she replied, and Phoenix is shut in there. He's bitten, and so is Charlie. I was going to tell you about it, but you are in a bad temper, and I don't deserve to hear." I picked up her hat and approached to reinstate it, but perceiving that the people of the house took her part, she commenced campering around the room, and on my giving chase ran like a mouse over and under and behind the furniture, rendering it ridiculous for me to pursue. Hareton and the woman laughed, and she joined them and waxed more impertinently still. "Well, Miss Cathy, if you were aware of those whose house you'd be in, you'd be glad enough to get out." "It's your father's, isn't it?" she said, turning to Hareton. "Nay," he replied, looking down and blushing bashfully. He could not stand a steady gaze from her eyes, though they were just his own. "Well, then, whose house is it? Is it your master's?" she asked. He colored deeper with a different feeling, muttered an oath, and turned away. "Well, who is his master?" continued the tiresome girl, appealing to me. "He talked about our house and the our folk. I thought that he had been the owner's son, and he never said, Miss... Oh, he should have done, shouldn't he? He's a servant." Hareton grew black as a thundercloud at this childish speak, and I silently shook my questioner, and at the last succeeded in equipping her for departure. "Now, okay, get my horse," she said, addressing her unknown kinsman as she would one of the stable boys at the Grange. And you may come with me. I want to see where the goblin hunter rises in the marsh, and to hear the fairyishes, as you call them. But please make haste. What's the matter? Get my horse, I say." "I'll be damned before I be thy servant," growled the lad. You'll see me what?" asked Catherine in surprise. "Damned, thou saucy witch," he replied. "There, Miss Cathy, you see what you've got into the pretty company," I interposed. Nice words to be used with the young lady. Pray ye don't begin to dispute with him. Come, let us seek for Minnie ourselves and be gone. Oh, but Ellen, she cried, staring, fixed in astonishment. How dare he speak to me so? Mustn't he be made to do as I ask him? Oh, you wicked creature! I shall tell Papa what you said. Now then. Hareton did not appear to feel this threat, so the tears sprung into her eyes with indignation. You bring the pony, she exclaimed, turning to the woman, and let my dog free this moment. Softly, miss, answered the addressed. You'll lose nothing by being civil. Though Mr. Hareton there be not the master's son, he's your cousin, and I was never hired to serve you. What? He's my cousin? Cried Kathy with a scornful laugh. Yes, indeed, responded the reprover. Oh, Ellen, don't let them say such things, she pursued in great trouble. Papa's gone to fetch my cousin from London. My cousin is a gentleman's son. That's my cousin. She stopped and wept outright, upset at the rare notion of her relationship with such a clown. Ah, hush, hush, I whispered. People can have many cousins, and all sorts, Miss Cathy, without being any worse for it. Only they needn't keep their company if they be disagreeable and bad. Well, he's not my cousin, Ellen, she went on, gathering fresh grief from rejection, and flinging herself into my arms for refuge from the idea. I was much vexed at her and the servant for their mutual revelations, having no doubt of Linton's approaching arrival, and communicated by the former being reported to Mr. Heathcliff, and feeling as confident that Catherine's first thought on her father's return would be to seek an explanation of the latter's assertion concerning her rude-bred kindred. Hareton, recovering from his disgust at being taken for a servant, seemed moved by her distress, and having fetched the pony round to the door, he took to appropriate her, a fine crooked-legged terrier whelp from the kennel, and putting it into her hand, bid her wished, for he meant not. Pausing in her lamentations, she served him with a glance of awe and horror, then burst forth anew. I could scarcely refrain from smiling at this antipathy to the poor fellow, who was a well-made athletic youth, good-looking in features and stout and healthy, but attired in garments befitting his daily occupations of working on the farm and lounging among the moors after the rabbits and game. Still, I thought I could detect in his physiognomy a mind owning better qualities than his father ever possessed. Good things lost amid a wilderness of weeds, to be sure, whose rankness far overtopped their neglected growth, yet notwithstanding evidence of a wealthy soil that might yield luxuriant crops under other and more favorable circumstances. Mr. Heathcliff, I believe, had not treated him physically ill, thanks to his fearless nature, which often offered no temptation to that course of oppression. It had been none of the timid susceptibility that would have given zest to ill treatment in Heathcliff's judgment. He appeared to have bent his malevolence on making him a brute. He was never taught to read or write, never rebuked for any bad habit which did not annoy his keeper, never led a single step towards virtue, or guarded by a single precept against vice. And from what I heard, Joseph contributed much to his deterioration by a narrow-minded partiality, which prompted him to flatter and pet him as a boy because he was the head of the old family, and as he had been in the habit of accusing Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, when children, of putting the master past his patience, and compelling him to seek solace and drink by what he determined their offalid ways, so that at present he laid the whole burden of Hareton's faults on the usurper of his property. If the lad swore, he wouldn't correct him, nor, however culpably he behaved. It gave Joseph satisfaction, apparently, to watch him go to the worst lengths. He allowed that he was ruined, that his soul was abandoned to perdition, but then he reflected that Heathcliff must answer for it. Hareton's blood would be required at his hands, and there lay immense consolation in that thought. Joseph had instilled into him a pride of name and his lineage. If he would, he had dared, would have fostered hate between him and the present owner of the heights, but his dread of that owner amounted to superstition, and he confined his feelings regarding him to mutter, innuendos, and private comminations. I don't pretend to be intimately acquainted with the mode of living customary in these days at Wuthering Heights. I only speak from hearsay, for I saw little. The villagers affirmed Mr. Heathcliff was near, and a cruel, hard landlord to his tenants, but the house inside had regained its ancient aspect of comfort under a female management, and the scenes of riot common in Hindley's time were now redacted. The master was too gloomy to seek companionship with any people, good or bad, and yet he is. This, however, is not making progress with my story. Miss Cathy rejected the peace offering of the terrier and demanded her own dogs, Charlie and Phoenix. They came limping and hanging their heads, and we set out for home, sadly out of sorts, every one of us. I could not wring from my little lady how she had spent the day, except that, as I supposed, the goal of her pilgrimage was Penistone Crags, and she arrived without adventure to the gate of the farmhouse, when Hareton appeared to issue forth, attended by some canine followers who attacked her train. They had a smart battle before their owners could separate them. That formed an introduction. Catherine told Hareton who she was and where she was going, and asked him to show her the way, finally beguiling him to accompany her. He opened the mysteries of the fairy cave and 20 other queer places, but being in disgrace, I was not favored with the description of interesting objects she saw. I could gather, however, that her guide had been a favorite till he hurt her feelings, and that she had hurt his feelings by addressing him as a servant, and that Heathcliff's housekeeper hurt hers by calling him her cousin. Then the language he had told her had rankled in her heart. She, who was always love and darling and queen and angel with everybody at the Grange, had to be insulted so shockingly by a stranger. She did not comprehend it, and hard work I had to obtain a promise that she would not lay the grievance before her father. I explained how he objected to the whole household at the Heights, and how sorry he would be to find that she had been there, but I insisted most on the fact that if she revealed my negligence of his orders, he would perhaps be so angry that I should have to leave, and Cathy could not bear that prospect. She pledged her word and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl. Whew, that's the end of that chapter. So I hope you guys enjoyed listening to more of Wuthering Heights. If you had a part that you really liked or were interested in, please feel free to leave a comment down below and what your thoughts are currently with the story. I think it's a little crazy, a little out of control. I'm kind of surprised that I didn't realize last time when we were reading that Catherine technically, I guess, died in childbirth. I wish that was more clearly defined. So I guess she had her daughter, Catherine II, and she died. And that was pretty much what ended up killing her. I originally thought it was because of a broken heart, but I guess it was childbirth. So I really wish Bronte kind of went and talked a little bit more about that. And then I thought it was pretty messed up how Heathcliff messed with Earnshaw to the point that, he became a creditor to Earnshaw and basically got Wuthering Heights through the mortgage that Earnshaw couldn't pay back. That was kind of sad, and took everything from Earnshaw's son, Hareton. So I thought that was pretty interesting and kind of sad and devious in a way. So let me know what your thoughts are on that. I'm definitely curious to talk to somebody about this book. It's a little out of control, a little crazy, not what I expected. But yeah, if you enjoyed watching me, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream pretty regularly. I do not stream on Mondays, so if you do want to hang out and get to listen to more of Wuthering Heights, I'll be streaming again on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so you can look forward to that. And yeah, I hope you guys all had fun listening to me read, and I wish you guys to always stay geeky